73.
For more information about investing, you may order NBR's home video, How to Invest in Mutual Funds. This program is available in either the VHS or DVD formats.
We are PBS.
Funding for local broadcast of Nightly Business Report has been provided by viewers like you and by the following. Key, delivering financial solutions to help small businesses reach their goals. Key, achieve anything.
Wake up! Tom and Gloria Peterson believe in the future, so they give to causes like Parkinson's and cancer research. They also know the value of OPB.
OPB has quality programs that you just can't get anywhere else.
We love it.
So we put OPB in our estate plan.
Call and learn about leaving a gift through your estate to make sure the programming you love will always be there.
The future of OPB is in your hands.
This week on Oregon Art Beat, meet Doc Denny. He's performed with Roy Rogers and the Sons of the Pioneers. At 84, Doc still performs every week in Klamath Falls. Gregory Grennan paints his unusual portraits of women in a very unusual way. Backwards on glass. We'll explain. And Tyler Schlichting comes from a very artistic family, but he definitely brings his own perspective to his painting.
This week on Oregon Field Guide, we use modern technology to learn more about the elusive sandhill cranes that visit Oregon every year. We'll also look into the latest attempts to control the mosquito population. No easy task. Then it's time to play as we try out the winter sport of ski joring. It's fast, fun, and catching on here in Oregon. Oregon Field Guide, tonight at 8:30.
It's a true first night with the New York Philharmonic as the season's first concert features the electrifying Lang Lang performing Chopin's first piano concerto. Mahler's magnificent First Symphony completes the evening. Be there and be there first. Next time on Live from Lincoln Center.
Join us tonight at 9 here on OPB.
This is OPB.
Funding for local broadcast of the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by viewers like you and by the following. Stein Oil Company, fueling for businesses in Clackamas, Oregon City, Milwaukee, and Tualatin.
Oregon Hematology Oncology, a locally owned practice, providing personalized cancer care in an environment of compassion and support for over a quarter century.
Schwabe, Williamson & Wyatt, a Pacific Northwest law firm with offices in Oregon and Washington. Legal advisors for the future of your business.
Good evening, I'm Jim Lehrer. On the NewsHour tonight, the news of this Thursday, then the latest on the path of Hurricane Rita, and Admiral Thad Allen, the man in charge of federal Katrina recovery efforts. Excerpts from today's committee vote to send the John Roberts Supreme Court nomination to the full Senate, a report from Oregon on a National Guard unit's duties in Afghanistan and elsewhere, and a Clarence Page essay on race and poverty connections.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by...
Proud parents Jake and Paula just sent their fourth son off to an Ivy League college.
You think it's easy putting 4 kids through college? We've been working at this since we got married. Now 2 of them are going to business school. Trust me, it's been no walk in the park. If we didn't have someone good helping us plan this whole thing, we never would have been ready.
Smith Barney. This is who we are. This is how we earn it.
Somewhere in the heartland, a child is sitting down to breakfast, which is why a farmer is rising for a 15-hour day, and a trucker is beginning a 5-day journey. An ADM is turning corn and wheat, soy and cocoa beans into your favorite foods. Somewhere in the heartland, a child is sitting down to breakfast, which is why so many work so long and take their job to heart. ADM, resourceful by nature.
And by Pacific Life. And CIT.
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Hurricane Rita weakened some today, but kept coming toward the Gulf Coast. By late in the day, top winds were 145 miles an hour, down from 175 miles an hour during the night. The Mammoth storm also began turning more to the north in its slow progress across the Gulf of Mexico. That shift put the likely landfall farther up the coast between Galveston, Texas and Louisiana by late Friday or early Saturday. Forecasters said the hurricane was likely to weaken further, but it could still be the strongest storm to hit Texas since official records began. The looming storm drove thousands of Texans into epic traffic jams on the main evacuation routes. There were 14-hour tie-ups around Houston, the nation's fourth largest city. They extended for 100 miles north on Interstate 45. By midday, officials reversed the southbound lane to handle the load. Even so, some people gave up and turned back. But Governor Rick Perry urged evacuees in low-lying areas not to gamble on a shift in the storm's path.
About every 8 hours, it's moving 10 miles to the east. So, we may dodge the bullet on Houston, Texas, but the fact of the matter is we don't know. And I would rather you be sitting in traffic for 8 to 12 hours, moving out of that storm's path, than taking a chance on staying and it doesn't change any farther to the east. We're talking about people's lives here.
The change in the hurricane's direction did alter plans in Corpus Christi, Texas. Authorities there relaxed the mandatory evacuation and made it voluntary instead. In other Texas developments, NASA closed the Johnson Space Center in Houston and handed off the International Space Station to Russian controllers. Authorities also plan to airlift at least 9,000 nursing home residents and homeless people out of Beaumont and Houston. And 95% of Galveston was already abandoned as the storm churned up heavy surf on the beachfront. Homes and businesses sat empty and stragglers boarded up buildings. As this animation shows, a Category 3 storm with a surge up to 18 feet could drown the island city. A hurricane in the year 1900 killed an estimated 8,000 people in Galveston. The hurricane's turn put New Orleans under a storm warning. Wind whipped up waves on Lake Pontchartrain and rain began falling. Engineers said the fractured levees could handle 6 inches of rain, but no more. Southwestern Louisiana could get 20 inches of rain, and today Governor Kathleen Blanco warned 500,000 people to leave that region.
I'm urging people to head north. You cannot go into Texas. Texas is preparing. The Hurricane I is still entering Texas, but on the east side of Texas. We are on the east side of the storm, just as Mississippi was. We can expect serious consequences.
The new hurricane also put a temporary halt to finding those killed by Katrina, but the official death toll rose again to 1,069. More than 800 other victims were in Louisiana. Overnight, the U.S. Senate followed the House and approved $6 billion in tax cuts for Gulf Coast recovery. The bill now goes to the president. And White House officials announced Mr. Bush will go to Texas tomorrow to check on preparations for Rita. We'll have more on the hurricane right after this news summary. The Senate Judiciary Committee approved John Roberts' nomination to be Chief Justice today. The vote was 13-5. All Republicans supported Roberts, along with 3 Democrats. They were Patrick Leahy of Vermont and Russ Feingold and Herb Kohl, both of Wisconsin. The confirmation vote in the full Senate is next week. We'll have more on this story later in the program. British troops kept a low profile in southern Iraq today. On Monday, the British stormed a jail in Basra to free 2 of their soldiers held by police and militiamen. At least 5 Iraqis died in the clashes. Also today, 1 U.S. soldier was killed and 7 wounded in bombings. 8 Iraqis died in other attacks. Delta Airlines announced plans today to eliminate up to 9,000 jobs, 17% of its workforce. It's also reducing wages for remaining workers and executives, including a 25% cut for the company's CEO. Delta filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection last week. The Labor Department reported more job losses today from Hurricane Katrina. In the latest weekly report, the storm accounted for another 103,000 claims for jobless benefits. That makes a total of 214,000 claims related to Katrina so far. On Wall Street today, stocks moved higher after oil prices fell slightly. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 44 points to close at 10,422. The NASDAQ rose 4 points to close above 2110. And that's it for the news summary tonight. Now it's on to Hurricane Rita, where it is and where it's going and preparing for it in Texas and Katrina-weary Louisiana. The Roberts vote in the Senate Judiciary Committee, an Oregon National Guard unit, and a Clarence Page essay. Hurricane Rita, first its track and strength. Jeffrey Brown spoke a short while ago to Max Mayfield of the National Hurricane Center.
Mr. Mayfield, welcome. What's the latest on where Rita is headed and when it might hit land?
We really haven't changed the forecast. It's still a very, very powerful Category 4 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale. Maximum sustained winds are 145 miles per hour based on aircraft data that we've been getting this afternoon. It's moving toward the west-northwest about 9 miles per hour, and we're very confident that it will gradually turn up more towards the northwest here over the next 24 hours. And that generally heads it into the direction of the extreme upper Texas coast. It makes a real difference on where the actual landfall occurs, if it's south of Galveston Bay or near Beaumont, Port Arthur, or over closer to Cameron. The highest storm surge will be near and to the east of where the center crosses the coast. And if it goes in just to the south of Galveston Bay, they could easily have 15 to 20 feet of storm surge. If it goes in just a little bit to the southwest there of Beaumont and Port Arthur, they'll get the storm surge. A little bit closer to the Louisiana-Texas border, then that Cameron, Louisiana, and Lake Charles area will get the highest storm surge. But this will have a big impact to a very large region.
This afternoon, Rita was downgraded to a Category 4, but how significant is that in terms of its strength when it hits land?
It's just not significant, and I've said it's kind of the difference between being run over by an 18-wheeler or by a freight train. Neither prospect is good.
When you say it's going to hit a large area, this is still a huge storm. How wide an area should be worried at this point?
Well, the hurricane warning goes from Morgan City, Louisiana, this red area that you see right here, over to Port O'Connor, Texas. So that's the main area that would be impacted by the possibly the hurricane force winds, but it's such a large circulation. We now have the tropical storm warning that goes all the way along the remainder of the Louisiana coast over to the mouth of the Pearl River. That's the Louisiana-Mississippi border, and that now includes the New Orleans area and Lake Pontchartrain. Also extends down southward here to Port Mansfield on the South Texas coast.
Well, I was going to ask you about New Orleans because you know, obviously, there's a lot of worry about the levees there. What can you tell them in terms of a forecast now?
Well, they're going to have some water in the southeast Louisiana area there, and the tides are currently about 2 feet above normal now in the areas already impacted by Katrina. That's southeast Louisiana, Mississippi, and all the way over to Alabama. Dauphin Island is reporting about 2 feet above normal. Those tides will likely come up gradually 3 to 5 feet above normal before it's all over, and they'll have some wave action on top of that. So they will have some coastal flooding there. The tropical storm force winds most likely be in these squalls that are going to be coming through and not be sustained for long periods of time.
In the next day, as this approaches, what is determining whether it gains or weakens in strength as it approaches land?
Well, a couple of things. The sea surface temperatures and the ocean heat content that it's going to be passing over. It gets a little bit cooler as you get closer to the coast, and also the upper level environment is not going to be quite as favorable, but that's right before it gets close to land. So I think the wise thing to do here is to go ahead and prepare for a Category 4 hurricane.
And I heard a forecaster today talking about the possibility that the storm, once on land, will stall out, as she put it. That it would sit there and rain for a few days.
We're very concerned about that as it moves on shore here in the 3, 4, even 5-day period there. If it stalls over eastern Texas, that eastern Texas, western Louisiana area could have some very, very heavy rainfall amounts.
All right, Max Mayfield of the National Hurricane Center. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you.
Now the view from two communities threatened by Rita. Ray Suarez has those, beginning with an interview late this afternoon with Alan Tharling, mayor of Port Lavaca, a city of about 12,000 on the Texas coast, halfway between Corpus Christi and Galveston.
Mayor Tharling, welcome. So with the news from the National Weather Service that the storm might be taking a more northerly path, does that put you more near the center of the bullseye, or perhaps move you away from the worst part of the storm?
Actually, it moves us away from the worst part. With it going in east of us, that would be a welcome, but right now we never take anything for granted.
Is Port Lavaca sheltered in any way, either natural or man-made, from the effects of a Category 4 storm?
A Category 4 would probably hit us pretty hard because we only have a barrier island in between us and the major Gulf, and the elevation here is about 18 to 20 feet depending on where you are in the city.
So what could you possibly be facing?
Right now, if it comes in where they're talking about, we'll still probably receive hurricane force winds, and we'll be receiving water of about a maybe 8 to 12 foot surge.
Are the people of Port Lavaca getting out as they've been ordered to do?
We did a mandatory evacuation, and also this evening, starting at dusk to dawn, we will have a curfew, and the people have done very well at getting out. Most all of our RV parks have emptied out, and most of our citizens who have special needs were taken out by bus this morning, and those with non-ambulatory positions were taken out yesterday by ambulance.
How many people did you have to worry about getting out of town?
We had 132 that we had to get out of town for special needs, and we had probably 8 bus loads we sent out this morning.
Was there a range of people who got out right away and those who you had to do some convincing on?
Some of them got out of here very quickly because we were struck by Claudette 2 years ago, and it was just a Category 1, so it did not take a lot of persuading.
And is that going well, or are the highways pretty choked heading away from the shoreline?
Fortunately for us, they're moving along steadily. We haven't had any major reports of problems.
Based on the best information you're getting now, when do you expect the storm to reach you?
We're expecting about 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, tropical force winds and heavier winds somewhere around midnight Friday.
And so far, have you had much help or needed much help from any other level of government, state, county, federal?
We've had great help from the state and the federal. Everything is already pre-positioned up in Fort Worth and Dallas area and San Antonio area, and they have been a part of this meeting every day in telephone conference to make sure we have all we need and that we have the proper resources to get people out of here and to be prepared once it hits.
What form did that help take?
They came through the state emergency management office of the governor, and they continually are in touch with us, keeping us informed of the routes that are best for us to take, what the surge might do to us, and what we can get that we may need. In some of the instances yesterday, we had to get airlift for some of the people that needed airlifting out to hospitals, and they were very quick to provide that.
Finally, Mayor, do you think the example of Hurricane Katrina just in the past weeks gave everybody a greater sense of urgency than they might have had otherwise?
I think that, coupled with the fact that many that live here in Port Lavaca weathered Hurricane Carla in 1961, which was a similar sized storm, and that just refreshed their memories, and I don't think it left any doubt in their minds that they needed to move on out.
Mayor Tharling, thanks for being with us. Good luck.
You're quite welcome. We hope those that are in the path will do fairly well.
Now the situation in Houston. We're joined by phone by Rick Lyman of the New York Times. Rick, television pictures from Houston show epic traffic jams. Have they begun to ease at all?
They certainly haven't begun to ease very much on the highways closest to the city. I understand that when you get out to the far outskirts where they're actually starting to utilize some of the incoming lanes for contraflow, as they call it, on the way out, it's starting to ease up a little bit. But the people within a few miles of downtown haven't felt it yet.
Have the difficulties in getting out of Houston caused the leadership there to perhaps modify or begin to modify the instructions they had given people about evacuating?
Well, I've been kind of driving around the city visiting neighborhoods, so I haven't been following what the city officials have been saying. But from talking to some other reporters who've been following it a little bit more closely, I think that they are detecting kind of a change of tone, perhaps. Not so much, if possible, get out of town. To if you don't have to leave, maybe you should just stay.
Is it easy to get gas if you decide it's finally time to load up the van and get out of there? Can you get gas?
Very, very difficult. There were only 2 or 3 gas stations that I saw open. I spent 3 hours driving all over Houston today. One of them had 47 cars in line to get to one of the few pumps that was still operating. The other 2 were not quite that bad. Prices have inched up through the day. There was talk to people who were sitting at a hamburger stand across the street from one gas station, said that the price had gone up from $2.58 a gallon to $2.89 a gallon just in a few hours.
Just to review, were Houstonians given a blanket order to evacuate, or was it just some sections of the city that were considered most vulnerable?
Well, that's right. It was only the mandatory evacuation applied only to the low-lying coastal counties and some parts of Harris County, which includes Houston, that are particularly that are low-lying and prone to flooding. The areas that were not in that mandatory evacuation just fell under a voluntary evacuation.
And in the emergency management plan for Houston, are people asked to go to specific places? I mean, it is a very large city, more than 2 million people. You can't have everybody trying to go to the same place, can you?
No, you can't, and there are not people. There are not specific locations people are told to go to. It's pretty much whichever city they have relatives in or a hotel room. What they did try to do was to evacuate different parts of the mandatory evacuation areas at different hours, so that everybody wasn't hitting the road at the same time.
So, in your view, and you've been on the streets of the city all day, are there still substantial numbers of people who plan to stay behind?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I'd say a great number of people. People refer back to Hurricane Allison in 1983. They say they don't expect this one to be much worse, especially if it follows the path towards Louisiana, and they're gonna ride it out. They say that New Orleans is a different city with different problems from Houston, and they're going to go home and hope that the worst that happens is they lose some shingles.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that idea that New Orleans is a different city. A look at a map would seem to indicate that Houston is not right on the water. What about its geography makes it still vulnerable to a storm like this?
Yeah, well, I used to live in Houston. I don't at the moment, but several years ago I lived in Houston. I didn't go through a hurricane, but I went through several severe tropical storms, and the city is very prone to flooding. It takes 2 or 3 storms before you figure out, because it seems like a very flat city, but it's not. And there are islands of high points, and you have to figure out where they are, and it takes 2 or 3 storms to figure that out. It's essentially built on swampy ground, basically, and it's one of those cities that houses don't have basements, and the water table is fairly near to where you're sitting at the dining room table.
There's also a significant network of canals. Does the water rise inside those? It's an important port.
It does. Almost every neighborhood that I visited, people were able to tell me, well, there's this particular bayou that's the first one to flood up, and certainly that one's going to flood up tomorrow. So if I lived within 2 blocks of there, I'd be moving, but I'm 4 blocks away, and I'm not worried about it. So it's the sort of city that people are very aware of how close they are to the flood lines.
When you go around the streets of the city, is it still easy to move? Is there much evidence of civil authority in command, in control?
I've seen some police cars driving around. It's been extremely calm in the city. There's almost no traffic. Most of the businesses are closed down. There are a few businesses that are open, a handful of gas stations. I saw a couple of giant pharmacies that were open, and actually some restaurants. But for the most part, places are closed down. The giant Galleria Mall on the west side of the city is completely closed down. The downtown, there's some traffic on the streets. For most of the day, I haven't seen one for a while. There were these giant articulated city buses that were kind of cruising the streets with nobody in them.
Is there a general awareness that the storm track may be changing a little bit and Houston may not have to bear the brunt of this storm?
I think that definitely this is not something that people are ignoring. They're paying very close attention to it. And, it's a city not unlike New Orleans that has been threatened over the years many times by hurricanes, and people have a pretty good sense of how hurricanes work and what news is good news.
Rick Lyman of the New York Times joining us from Houston. Thanks a lot, Rick.
Thank you. So long.
And now to Coast Guard Vice Admiral Thad Allen. He heads federal relief operations in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. I spoke with him earlier this evening from Baton Rouge. Admiral Allen, welcome.
Good afternoon.
How do you see the threat to the New Orleans area right now from Hurricane Rita?
Well, Jim, we're watching it very closely, and as the hurricane moves across, we got several concerns. One of them is a surge associated with the water that's moving on the right side of the hurricane as it comes forward. Wind that'll be generated on that side of the hurricane, and to the extent that there's substantial rain bands produced by that, that's also a concern. Once the storm makes landfall, if there's any reason for that it might be stalled or moved back to the east, any substantial increased rainfall, those are all areas of concern right now.
And the rainfall specifically, what is that? How does that threaten New Orleans? What the frail situations? Take us through that. What kind of rain and what kind of effect it could have?
Well, as well known, the levee systems in and around New Orleans and the surrounding parishes are substantially weakened following Katrina. And while we've done extensive repairs and repaired the breaches to many of the canals and levees, they are not as high as they once were, and there's still an assessment going on by the Corps of Engineers about what other damage might be there that requires, further, more technical assessment of the levee strength. Because of that, we've asked the Corps of Engineers to give us some estimates about what might be the implications of some kind of an extended rain event. 3 inches in 6 hours, 6 inches, 9 inches, and so forth. And we're concerned that if we get a substantial amount of rain, there could be reflooding in the city. We also have the issue of the pumps that are in New Orleans that are available to remove the water. They're working at limited capacity, and some of them are out of service and have not been repaired yet. So all of that gives us concern for an extended rain event. We need to move on with the rest of the recovery in New Orleans, including finishing the final sweeps of the houses, making sure there are not any more survivors or remains out there that need to be brought out and removed. This will potentially complicate that. Reintroducing water back into the city could also slow down the repair of the infrastructure in terms of water, electricity, telephone, and so forth.
Are you operating, you and your colleagues, operating under the assumption that this is going to happen, that there's going to be enough rain and those levees are going to have a problem and parts of New Orleans are going to reflood?
Well, I think you have to act under the assumption that if you get enough rain, and since you can't tell how much rain is coming, that could be a possibility. That's the reason, in conjunction with the mayor, that we've recommended that folks not stay in New Orleans. In fact, some of the folks that did not evacuate the first time have actually evacuated this time, and the mayor suspended the reentry into the city and the folks going in and taking a look at the business districts. So we won't have a problem with trying to evacuate people in the city. They already will have been gone. Then it's a matter of just trying to protect the infrastructure that's there so you can sustain the recovery after the storm has passed.
So you don't believe any lives are going to be at stake if the worst case scenario happens along the lines you talked about a moment ago?
Well, we're hopeful that everybody's out of the city, and we've taken great pains to communicate that. We have taken all the responders in the city, including the DOD personnel, the folks that are operating in other federal agencies, and the local responders for the city themselves, and they'll be positioned in ground that's well above any flooding levels, and they'll be able to respond. That'll be a much different position than what we were in before the first storm.
Sure. So no lives are in jeopardy as we speak, from your perspective?
We're taking every thoughtful approach to make sure that doesn't happen, Jim.
All right, now you said the recovery work itself in New Orleans from Katrina was about to wind down, and where were you? I mean, you said it was all, most of the water is gone, most of the houses have now been looked at. Can you quantify that further than that?
Yeah, I can, Jim, and maybe recovery is not completely done because you can probably make a case of recovery just starting. What I was referring to is the sweep we made through the city to touch every single house, and we did that in 3 phases. The first phase was called a hasty search. While many of the parts of the city were still underwater, whether it was by wading or by boat, we tried to touch every dwelling to make sure there wasn't somebody in an attic still on a roof, or there wasn't a search and rescue case there to be accomplished. And also, in the process of doing that, we were looking for any remains and trying to move those remains out with dignity and respect. The second phase is what we call a primary search. We went back to every dwelling again and did a more thorough search of the house, looking in the windows and so forth. But some of the houses were inaccessible because of water levels. The third phase is what we call a secondary search, and that's going back into dwellings that are now dry that can be entered, and then there's a decision by local law enforcement on whether or not the houses should be entered to search for either survivors or remains. The reason it's a local law enforcement decision, we have a lot of houses that were locked when people evacuated, and they have belongings in there, and there's an assumption that there'll be some kind of security or integrity to their dwelling. So the decision to go inside a house, even if it was partially submerged, we're leaving it to local law enforcement to see whether or not they want to enter it, and that's the secondary search.
That's what's underway now.
That is correct, and that's being done with urban search and rescue forces from around the country that are working with the local state law enforcement officials, and where remains are involved, the state medical examiner.
And remains are still being found?
That's dropped off quite a bit, Jim, but we are on occasion finding remains. These are in houses where they were inundated up to the eaves, and we're just now gaining access to not large numbers, but some remains.
How close are you to being finished?
Well, I think we were pretty close to the final secondary searches and the water being pumped out of the city. It remains to be seen with the Rita and what kind of a water effect we're going to have in relation to that. But I would only say is once the water has been removed, that's only the beginning of the larger recovery, and a lot of stuff to do with the city. We're working with the city right now with their planners on where the city needs to go next in terms of how they're going to repair the infrastructure, how they're going to create the enabling infrastructure and elements for what the new New Orleans is going to be like. And that includes probably a dwelling-by-dwelling assessment against some kind of a checklist against building code, environmental regulations, and in some cases we even have historical buildings where we're going to have to consult on what the disposition should be. That painstaking, almost dwelling-by-dwelling work is going to be long, arduous, and really is going to have to establish what the baseline is going to be for the new city.
Sure. But as we speak, all that work is stopped until Rita has done its job. Is that right, one way or another?
That's correct. The only work that hasn't stopped and will continue up until the time that we don't think it's safe to do it anymore is continuing to work on the levees, making sure they're reinforced as much as they can be through the Corps of Engineers, and making sure all the pumps are working so whatever rain event we have associated with Rita that we can deal with as quickly as possible.
Are any of the resources that have been available to you now being switched over to the Rita effort?
Well, some of them are, but I would caution everybody to understand that New Orleans has not been left alone. We are still making sure that New Orleans is being cared for, and in particular, as say DOD forces are moved out of the city, they're being replaced with National Guard, and should National Guard forces be needed elsewhere in the state of Louisiana because of Rita response. I had a meeting this afternoon with General Honore and Governor Blanco, and General Honore is prepared to reinforce any force vacuums that may exist with the 82nd Airborne, so I think we're in pretty good shape.
I noticed that the governor of Texas has asked the 10,000 Texas National Guardsmen who are in Louisiana and Mississippi to come back to Texas. Is that going to affect your operations?
I don't think it'll affect it substantially. The Adjutant General for the state of Louisiana is actually working that with the National Guard Bureau, and there are other forces around the country that can be flowed into Louisiana and or Texas to the extent that they need to do that. And I think those force adjustments are being negotiated right now with the National Guard Bureau. But based on my meeting with Governor Blanco, the Adjutant General, and General Honore, I think we're in pretty good shape.
Admiral, is there an Admiral Allen-like figure for the federal government in place for Hurricane Rita?
There is. It's Rear Admiral Larry Harrith, and I believe he's probably in Austin right now.
Have you talked to him?
I did. He came through on his way. We had a chance to basically share some experiences and organizational issues about how you stand up principal federal official type function. This storm and Rita are the first time we've really vigorously exercise this principal federal official role in anything other than a planned event. So while there's a lot of doctrine out there on how to do it, we are, as you know, sometimes writing the book as we go, but we've been able to exchange some experiences, and I think it's been good for both of us.
Did you have one single piece of advice that you thought was the most important that you gave him?
Pick a very good chief of staff.
Okay. Well, Admiral, good luck to you, and thanks a lot for being with us this afternoon.
My pleasure, Jim.
Still to come on the NewsHour tonight, the Roberts vote, the Oregon National Guard, and a Clarence Page essay. Kwame Holman has the Roberts story.
When the Senate Judiciary Committee convened this morning, there was no doubt it would send the John Roberts nomination to the full Senate with an affirmative vote. 10 of the committee's 18 members are Republicans, and they were solidly behind him. The only question was how many of the panel's 8 Democrats would vote for him. The majority of Democrats, in fact, complained about the answers Roberts gave during last week's confirmation hearings. California's Dianne Feinstein.
Now, I realized this past week, after reading and rereading the transcripts, going over answers to questions, that I knew as little about what Judge Roberts really thought after the hearings as I did before the hearings.
New York's Charles Schumer.
That's why I hope whatever happens with Judge Roberts, that the next nominee will be more forthcoming and will answer more questions about his or her legal views, and that all relevant documents will be provided.
Texas Republican John Cornyn said judicial nominees are not obligated to answer every question.
Now, I understand that when Senator Schumer and others say that they want to know the answers to the questions that were asked, I don't blame them for wanting to know. I guess every contestant in every sporting event, every lawsuit would like to know ahead of time whether their desired outcome will prevail. But I submit that particularly in courts of law, no one is entitled to know ahead of time what the outcome will be. Because the very premise of our judicial process is that courts are supposed to be fair and listen to both sides or all sides of an argument. The judges are supposed to be disinterested in the outcome and impartial. And that judges finally be independent of the political process. So no one is entitled to know what how Judge Roberts will rule on these hot-button issues of the day. No one is.
But Delaware Democrat Joseph Biden argued past nominees did give sufficient answers. Justice Anthony Kennedy, for example.
Justice Kennedy stated, and I quote, the essentials of the right to human dignity, the injury to the person, the harm to the person, the anguish to the person, the inability of a person to manifest his or her personality, the inability of a person to obtain his or own self-fulfillment, the inability of a person to reach his or her potential. That's the scope of the right to privacy he saw. But in contrast, Justice Roberts declined to associate himself with anything approaching the broad sweep of Justice Kennedy's vision, instead casting his formulation in a very narrow and crabbed way. Not only would Judge Roberts not tell this committee how broadly the right to privacy should extend, he declined even to endorse the general right to privacy. And he repeatedly said he believed in the right to privacy, as does, quote, every member of the court to some extent or another.
Having listened to the complaints aimed at Judge Roberts, Republican Lindsey Graham pointed out that Justice Antonin Scalia, a staunch conservative, was approved almost unanimously by the Senate.
I would just urge this committee, as we go to the next debate, to remember that Scalia was obviously conservative. There is no way Roberts is more conservative than Scalia. There is no way that Roberts is more challenging and in your face than Scalia in his writings. Scalia got 98 votes. Now what's happened? Ginsburg got 96 votes. What's going on? I think Senator Grassley put his finger on it. There's a lot of pressure on us all. This is the easiest vote a Republican will ever make. It is so easy for us to vote for Roberts.
Meanwhile, 3 Democrats on the committee admitted Roberts' performance during his confirmation hearings was impressive, as is his stellar legal record. Vermont's Patrick Leahy is the committee's top Democrat.
In my judgment, in my experience, but especially in my conscience, I find it better to vote yes than no. And ultimately, my Vermont roots have always told me to go with my conscience.
Leahy went on to say he would support Roberts, and 2 other Democrats, Herb Kohl and Russ Feingold, both from Wisconsin, announced they would too.
Now, I have talked to a number of people who know John Roberts, or to people who know John Roberts. All of those, I have heard from directly or indirectly, have seen him develop since 1985 into one of the foremost Supreme Court advocates in the nation, whose skills and judgments are respected by lawyers all across the ideological spectrum. They don't see him as a champion of one cause, as a narrow ideologue who wants to impose his views on the country. They see him as open-minded, respectful, thoughtful, devoted to the law, and truly one of the great legal minds of his time. Now, that carries a great deal of weight with me.
Meanwhile, committee Republicans, as expected, had nothing but praise for the judge.
Whether you're for or against him, you see him as a person with a brilliant mind.
Judge John Roberts is modest, he's decent, and he's a fair man who has earned the title of Chief Justice of the United States.
I have never, in my whole time here, seen a witness who made such sense and who literally was so superior.
The clerk will call the roll.
After the senators spoke, Chairman Arlen Specter called for the vote, and the Roberts nomination cleared the committee comfortably, 13-5, setting up a full Senate vote by next Thursday. And Chairman Specter told committee staff to be ready to work on hearings for the president's next Supreme Court nominee to replace Justice Sandra Day O'Connor.
Next tonight, the National Guard. More than 40,000 National Guard troops have been mobilized from all over the country to help provide relief from Hurricanes Katrina and now Rita. About 1,400 of those are from Oregon. Oregon National Guard units also continue to serve abroad. Tom Bearden profiled one unit that recently departed for a tour of duty in Afghanistan.
On a hot summer day at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, a crew from the Oregon National Guard practiced hoisting a soldier out of a simulated minefield. The crew from the 1042nd Medical Evacuation Company also practiced the more traditional job of removing badly wounded people from the battlefield. Part of the 1042nd was in the final stages of training before leaving for a 6-month deployment to Afghanistan.
Does it give you pause at all to think you might be doing the rescue mission for a wounded soldier for real in a few weeks?
The National Guard is volunteer. We volunteered to be in it, and this is why we did it. We're going to go do what we've been trained to do, and it's not just save our soldiers, NATO soldiers, enemy soldiers, civilians, and we're there for everybody.
This is not the 1042nd's first overseas deployment. The NewsHour profiled the Salem, Oregon-based unit in May of 2000 when it was stationed at Camp Eagle in central Bosnia as part of the NATO peacekeeping force. Since then, 1042nd soldiers have spent time in Afghanistan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. In fact, a majority of the members, like pilot Earl Poole, have spent much of the last 5 years overseas.
Almost as much time as I've been back home.
Is that tough on your family?
It is. It's really hard for my wife to juggle. She, taking care of 5 kids and still working. It's she's probably having a harder time than I'm having right now.
Mindy Hagerman had a hard time too when her husband Rob went to Bosnia 5 years ago. She served as the family coordinator for the 1042nd during the 9 months he was gone, trying to help other spouses cope with the separation. Her son Tyler was a newborn then. Daughter Bree was 3.
I really
really missed him when he was gone. And when he came home, it was like a miracle. And I was glad that he hadn't passed away.
When First Lieutenant Hagerman returned, his family gave him a grand welcome home. But the readjustment was hard.
And it just was almost overwhelming in the sense that it was so different from Bosnia and the lifestyle he was leading there, and what he was seeing and how the people, the civilians of Bosnia were living versus how we were living. And just the transition, I think, was hard. Not to mention a new son he didn't know, you know. I had 3 other people that I was really close with, and they were kind of my co-coordinators, and of the 4 of us, 3 of us had divorces. It broke us. Never sit all the way.
The Hagermans are not alone. Divorce rates throughout the Army have more than doubled in the last 5 years, as soldiers are increasingly sent on long deployments. Some 1042nd members also suffered financially while they were gone. Sergeant William Kelly took a 50% pay cut while he was in Bosnia repairing helicopters. When he returned to his job with a small logging firm in Oregon, he felt distinctly unwelcome. Eventually, he quit after a second deployment.
Now, you can make a law saying that you have to get your job back with benefits and any pay increases, but you cannot legislate the attitude of the people that you were working with.
Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Brady commanded the 1042nd in Bosnia and later in Afghanistan. Despite the personal toll, he himself divorced. He says those missions help soldiers prepare for the more dangerous missions they're doing now. Brady now works in the Pentagon at the Army Operations Center, but was back in Oregon this summer visiting his children.
I think Bosnia was a really good training experience for us. There wasn't, we weren't getting shot at. It gave us an opportunity to use the aviation safety equipment and the things on the aircraft that taught us how to be safe in that environment.
The 1042nd's repeated activation and deployment is not unusual. It stems from the post-Vietnam decision to put critical support activities, like medevac, into Guard and Reserve units instead of the active Army. Traditionally, reservists trained 1 weekend a month and for 2 weeks in the summer. Occasionally, they were called up for emergencies. Stints on active duty came more frequently during operations in Bosnia and Kosovo, and after 9/11, deployments were longer and even more frequent. But under the current mobilization authority, there is a legal limit on how long soldiers like these can be called up. It's 24 months in any 5-year period. Many have already reached that cap, and many others are approaching it. As a result, about 60% of the soldiers in the Guard and Reserve are now considered ineligible for normal 18-month deployments. Earlier this year, Lieutenant General James Helmley, commander of the Army Reserve, warned of a looming problem.
It's a serious challenge. The 24 months is a matter of statute first, the partial mobilization law, and then the way we have implemented that within the Department of Defense restricts that further.
Retired Brigadier General David McInnes, who now works as a military analyst, says the challenge is even greater for some specialty units.
All of the National Guard Special Operations Forces have been exhausted under this authority. Most of the National Guard Aviation Forces, all of the civil affairs, psychological operations, and combat service support forces have been exhausted under this authority. We are approaching a crisis. The President is going to have to go to Congress and ask for Congress to give him additional authority, or he's going to have to declare a new national emergency, which will allow him to restart the clock, the 24-month clock.
But Lieutenant General Helmley says that other Pentagon planners are finding other ways to address the issue, everything from farming out non-essential services to private contractors to restructuring the entire Army.
We are restructuring about 100,000 spaces in the Army. That's not taking down size. It is taking artillery units, making them into MP. It's using the manpower to stand up brand new, high-demand, low-density civil affairs PSYOPs units.
But some high-skill units, like medevac, couldn't be quickly replaced, and so the problem remains. Some of the 1042nd troops bound for Afghanistan are so close to exceeding the 24-month cap that the Army couldn't have legally required them to go. This is Chief Warrant Officer Richard Shagnon's third lengthy deployment in 5 years.
We have some people that are reaching their maximum amount of call-up time, but like on this mission, all of us volunteered to go on this. We see that it's important to do that. If we didn't volunteer, they'd take some other unit. You know, I feel sorry for the active duty units. They get pulled out, and then they come home, and then they're going back again for a year.
The majority of the 1042nd's troops are staying behind in Salem. Weekend drills go on as usual. Equipment has to be maintained, the paperwork done. And the state has plenty of things for them to do. Fighting forest fires, for example, or conducting high-altitude mountain rescues. Major Mark Ulvin is the current commander of the 1042nd.
Some states are concerned that deployment of National Guard units is drawing down the state's ability to deal with those kinds of missions.
Well, it's true. I mean, you can't double your resources in order to keep troops back home and then also have them deployed overseas. So yes, there is definitely a draw of state assets out of the state for these deployments.
Frequent deployments have also had an impact on recruiting and retention. Sergeant Janet Christie went to Bosnia and after 9/11 also went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina to support 1042nd members in Afghanistan the first time. Despite her enthusiasm for the 1042nd, Christie is no longer with the unit. She now works as a supply technician at the Oregon National Guard's headquarters in Salem.
When I got back from Fort Bragg, both my kids sat me down and asked me to find a different job that wouldn't take me away from home for so long. And I told them that I wanted to finish what I started. You know, it's been 17 years, I'm not going to quit. I said, but I will try to find a unit where the possibilities aren't as great.
In an effort to relieve some of the burden, the Pentagon is retraining active duty soldiers to take on some of the missions currently held by the Reserve and Guard. But it's not going to happen overnight. And the idea of sending some jobs back to active duty forces worries former Commander Brady. He thinks in some cases the reserves are better qualified because of their extensive civilian experience.
The guys that are in the back working on patients are EMTs, you know, they work for major fire departments, they're emergency room nurses. The skill level of the medic and the reserve component medevac unit far exceeds that kid on active duty. Now that we've been at war for a while and everybody's getting the same experience, probably as far as combat experience, they're very equal. But in the big picture of trauma and taking care of, you know, serious wounds, I'd put up the 1042nd or any National Guard medevac unit to any active duty unit any day.
The 1042nd's record will be hard to match. No one lost, no one seriously injured, despite being in some of the most dangerous places around.
And finally tonight, essayist Clarence Page of the Chicago Tribune talks about the connections between race, class, and poverty.
It saddens me to see and hear how persistently we Americans confuse the touchy issues of race and class. Listen, for example, to this line from the president's speech in New Orleans about hurricane relief in the Gulf Coast. Listen to how he starts off talking about class and poverty, then ends up talking about race, as if the two were one and the same.
As all of us saw on television, there's also some deep, persistent poverty in this region as well. That poverty has roots in a history of racial discrimination, which cut off generations from the opportunity of America.
It is true that black poverty has a history in racial discrimination, but poverty is not a problem for blacks only. America has more white poor than black poor. We always have. But a greater percentage of blacks are poor, especially in cities like New Orleans, where America's invisible poor took on a highly visible and distinctively black face during the Hurricane Katrina disaster, compounding the perception that race and poverty were the same. But beneath surface perceptions, Hurricane Katrina relief is an issue of class more than race. African Americans who had money and wheels got out of New Orleans, where the mayor is black, leaving poor blacks and others behind as quickly as their white neighbors did. Who gets left behind? That's the question that defines poverty in an upwardly mobile society. Americans are uncomfortable talking about race and even less comfortable talking about class. Our utopian ideal is a class-free society, a house without glass ceilings, a place where all men and women are created equal, and everyone can be all that they want to be. In the real world, we feel self-conscious and defensive about how far short we have fallen of that ideal. A Pew Center poll found more Americans express feelings of depression after New Orleans than they felt after 9/11. Our greatest shock around 9/11 came on the first day. The horrors of Katrina seemed to get worse and worse, without relief, as the days dragged on and on. In the durable spirit of the children, displaced by the big storm, learning to smile again, we see the greatest wealth comes not in the wallet, but in the spirit. Beneath the thin veneer of skin color, we Americans have a lot more in common than in separation. Racial progress means that today we are separated less by race or ethnicity than by income or opportunity. We congratulate ourselves for our progress and downplay our differences until a crisis like Katrina boils them back into visibility, reminding us of how vulnerable we are, how closely we ride to the edge, along with our sense of civility and community, only a paycheck away from poverty, the issue that we don't like to deal with, yet won't stop dealing with us. I'm Clarence Page.
Again, the major developments of this day. Hurricane Rita weakened some and turned more to the north. Forecasters said it could strike near the Texas-Louisiana border late Friday or early Saturday. The storm drove thousands of people into 14-hour traffic jams north of Houston, and its changing course raised new fears of flooding in New Orleans. The official death toll from Hurricane Katrina rose again to 1,069. More than 800 of the victims were in Louisiana. And the Senate Judiciary Committee approved John Roberts to be Chief Justice. The full Senate votes next week. And once again to our honor roll of American service personnel killed in Iraq. We add them as their deaths are made official and photographs become available. Here in silence are 4 more. We'll see you online and again here tomorrow evening with Mark Shields and David Brooks, among others. I'm Jim Lara. Thank you and good night.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lara has been provided by